Okay, perfect. Apparently we're streaming now. Wonderful. Well, we're here, guys. Sorry for the delay. We've had a few technical issues, but we've managed to solve them. So thank you for your patience.
Amen.
We've got, hi everyone, welcome. It's Friday morning here and it is a Thursday evening where Justin is. So where are you at the moment?
I'm in the United States. I am in a state called Maryland, which probably the most famous city, maybe Washington, D.C. you might have heard of.
Yes.
And between D.C. and Baltimore, where the headquarters of the Adventist Church is, in a place called Silver Springs. Well, that's where the GC is at. I'm in a town called Columbia. Anyway.
Oh,
Maryland.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And so what is your role and what do you do in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, well, I'm a pastor. A pastor, as you guys say down there.
Yep.
A pastor. I work at the General Conference. There's different departments there, and I work at the General Conference, Sabbath School, and Personal Ministries department. It's a very long department, and I'm an assistant director there, and I'm also the editor for the Young Adult Sabbath School Quarterly Guide.
Yeah, awesome. Mm-hmm. Awesome. And that's why we've asked Justin to come online during this time because I've heard through, so hi everyone, you might know me already because I'm Rosen, I work in the youth department in this conference. But I've just heard from some of you guys that Sabbath school during isolation and even just generally Sabbath schools it can be challenging, especially if you're a leader or someone participating or getting people to get involved. And I attended one of Justin's seminars earlier this year and it only went for an hour, but I know that I learned more in that hour than I had for the past 10 plus years. And just, so I reached out to Justin, I just thought, I want you to share some of that wisdom with the wider community. And so we've got some of you from some of our other Instagram pages online, so welcome. And we've got a couple of questions here, but we really invite you to engage with us. So if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, feed them through to us and we will ask those during this time. So talking all things Sabbath school, how do you prepare to lead a Sabbath school class? So someone's asked you, hey, you've been part of this class for a little while, we'd like you to lead one out. How do you prepare to lead a Sabbath school well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And especially when it comes to young adult Sabbath schools, you got to be really good. You got to prepare because young adults tend to be really picky. And if it's like really bad, they're like, oh, that's a bad one. And they like never come back again. It's just, I think the taste of young adults with all the media and all whatever, it's just, they have a very high level and high expectation. And although that sounds like a bad news, like if you're leading out like, oh no, that has to be really good. But really for a good Sabbath school Bible study is to really be based on the Bible. I know that sounds very elliptical, cyclical, and just it's dumb, but there's just a lot of Sabbath schools out there that just, you may read one verse and then you just kind of like branch out into all the conversation out there and opinions, and then you just run out the clock, but really for a Sabbath school teacher is you got to think out what you want to accomplish, what you want to teach. And I always say is try to go backwards, right? So whatever the lesson is, whether you use Inverse or the adult Bible study guide or whatever your own makeshift Bible study is, kind of go with your conclusion. And what's that conclusion? Is it, hey, let's read the Bible more, or let's go do more community service, or whatever that is. And then the Bible verses in the middle, and then you think of an introduction that's really inviting and stimulating, kind of work backwards, and then in your actual study you go through it the other way.
Sure. So think of the conclusion and work backwards.
Without that map, what usually happens is you start really well and just kind of like you run out the clock and it's vague. And then
you never get to a conclusion.
Never get anywhere.
Because there's not enough time.
Exactly.
I've been in plenty of those kind of classes before. I may have led some in the past. Just being honest.
Confession time. Right
what about some fundamental do's and don'ts? I know that I've been in as a pastor or having, as a young adult, as a teenager, having to lead Sabbath school classes. we kind of never get told how to teach, or at least personally, I was never taught how to teach. So we were just going off what our parents or what the youth above us used to do. And I do believe that through that process, I may have picked up some fundamental don'ts. So what are some fundamental do's, things you should do during a class, and some of the don'ts?
I look at Acts chapter 2, and you look at the sermon, and I know it's a sermon, but you can kind of use that as kind of a skeleton for a good Bible study. There's about 36 verses there. And of those 36 verses, 18 of them, Peter is quoting from the Old Testament. He's just reading Bible verses, right? And then after he reads the Bible verses, he's explaining those Bible verses. And after he explains them, there's like 2 verses of an appeal. So that end is the appeal. It's kind of like your goal. And that appeal can be like a Mark Finley. You look into the camera and you're like, this emotional appeal. But most likely, if you do that in a Sabbath school study, it's kind of awkward. So it's just a simple question. Hey guys, do you guys want to read the Bible together more? Or hey guys, let's try to get the Bible. Let's go to church on time. And it just whatever, find that conclusion. And then the Bible verses and explaining it. If you have a group, and this is where the art of the Bible study in the Sabbath school is that you're not explaining as the teacher, you're not the one explaining all these verses, but you're a conductor of an orchestra. And hopefully if your class has all studied their verses out, right? You're calling on the woodwinds and the brass, and you're telling the percussion to come out. You're telling the I don't know my instruments, but whatever instrument to come out, or hey, cellos, you're too loud, so you gotta, calm down. Don't talk anymore. And then, piccolo. So you're kind of conducting that out. And you want to map out where you want to go. Sometimes you have some comments that are really appropriate. Sometimes they're totally random, and you acknowledge them, you love them, but then you kind of move back and recalibrate where you want to go. So it's kind of where that's a definite what you want to do. You want to map out your study through that hour or 45 minutes, whatever you have. Definitely what you don't want to do is just let the Spirit lead. And here's the Holy Spirit always leads, right? But sometimes we kind of use that as an excuse, like, I'm not going to prepare. We're just going to depend on the extroverts to carry it. And it just goes in this random, and you end up talking about like, Marmite and last day events and the Sunday law and how they're connected. And that's not where you want. Oh, you guys don't eat Marmite. You guys do Vegemite. Sorry.
Vegemite.
So you want to definitely plan it out. Probably another humorous thing that is it's a given, but that I hear at all the bad Sabbath schools that I've been to is in the beginning, it's this like, oh, how many of you did your lesson? And you're already starting off on a downer, because if they did, then great. If they didn't, and usually the young adult classes I've been to, a lot of people don't because they're busy. Or hey, how many of you did the memory verse? Or it's just not a very stimulating, positive, uplifting, inspirational start to a Bible study. It's kind of a downer. Or hey, the teacher's not here, so I was asked to do this yesterday. That may be true, but you don't have to say that. You don't have to admit it. Probably the last don't that I can think of is don't read the quarterly. Don't read the Bible study guide. And I'm probably more like the Zoom Sabbath schools. They don't do that anymore. But when we used to be in face to face, people used to read, hey, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Rose, can you read Thursday? Oh, Rose isn't here again. All right, let's just skip over Thursday. Let's go to Friday. If you do that, you reward those people who don't study it. And then you'll get more of them, and you punish the people that are prepared. And so you have this inverse effect that you have.
So how should you present? So just say you've done your Monday or your Sunday to Friday studies. How do you go about presenting something holistic without doing let's look at Monday's theme and Tuesday's theme and Wednesday's theme, like this segmental, or the way that it's partitioned? How do you present something holistic?
So the study guide is precisely that. It's a Bible study guide. I remember teaching, training Sabbath school teachers once, and I told him, hey, don't read from the quarterly. And this guy came up, and he's like, how can you tell people not to read from it? It is near inspired material. And I just scratched my head. I'm like, I know we have Ellen White inspiration issues in the church, but I never heard that the Sabbath School Quarterly was inspired. That is just bizarre, right? The Sabbath School is not inspired. I can tell you as an editor, someone who works at GC, even Cliff Goldstein, who's the editor, who probably say the same thing. It's not inspired. So just imagine you take your Sabbath School Quarterly, put it in a blender, and just like whip it up, and then pour it out. And as you pour out, what will naturally happen is that the water and the oil will naturally separate and congeal, and you get these different topics that make sense into your own mind, right? And however that makes sense in your mind, however you want to organize it, you still use the material that the ABSG, the Adult Bible Study Guide, is giving, but you don't have to go Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And my high recommendation that I'll make is just choose one passage in Scripture. Not one verse. One verse is a little too little to talk about for an hour, but maybe even one chapter or a passage or whatever, and read it through with her class, and then just knock that out. And don't refer to your Bible study guide, so that even if you have guests, if you have non-Adventists, you're just doing a good Bible study guide, a good Bible study. And those happen to be the most memorable. And what's the cool thing is, next time one of your class members reads that passage again, they're going to remember that Bible study that you had. And so this is it's you want to get people back to the Bible, back to Jesus, and not back to some artificial Bible study guide.
And I love that. I love how you've expressed that, because it's not so prescriptive. It's not like this is what you have to look at. It's kind of, these are some ideas which we've formulated, like grow them and see where you go with them. So absolutely, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So now thinking in terms of, and I'm thinking the face-to-face interaction here, so when we can meet together, but perhaps this is something that people are challenged with on Zoom as well. What are some factors that can contribute to engagement or non-engagement while running a class? So are there any things that we can control or are within our control that might help someone speak out or be a bit more quieter? Just practically speaking.
Yeah. So as a teacher, as a leader, you want to develop that spiritual sensitivity, that you're not just there to teach a class, right? I mean, you are there to teach class, but you're there to meet their needs and to minister to your class. This is kind of, these are your people. And sometimes people go through stuff. They're having a bad week, or maybe, I think Satan really attacks people from their commute from home to church, like in that car ride, or Saturday mornings, like it's just, and some people just come with a very bad attitude to church. So don't let that disrupt you, but you need to be mindful of that and to minister to their needs. One thing, let me talk about Zoom, and we'll go to face-to-face.
Yes,
One thing that I've noticed about Zoom Sabbath schools that's really great is sometimes people are so into the logistics and so like, all right, we got to start at 9:30 and we're going to ending at 10:30. All right, so 9:30, go, and you go through. It's an awesome Bible study, and now we're done, and then it's off, and you shut the computer down. And so what happens is you've had great Bible study, but you've had zero interaction, and it's just kind of like watching another sermon, and just with more boxes. So you kind of want to give like 10 minutes before or after of just like depressurizing and goof off time, and just talking and having that social interaction. And I've noticed that if you have that time, it really kind of lubricates the rest of the Bible study, rather than make it so formal and program oriented. You're just really seeing where people are at. For the face-to-face, I've noticed that the teachers that visit their members, it's kind of a foreign idea now, or maybe even it's antiquated. Like, and I'm finding that the next generation is like, wow, people actually do that. And it is awkward. You want to call and you want to maybe notify the people that you're coming over nowadays. But visiting, I mean, the teacher should be praying for each of their classmates, should be visiting them, not every week, but, at least the Sabbath school teachers are on the forefront of bringing back some of those members who are on the edge, the gray zoners. And all that takes is just one visit and be like, hey, what's up? What's going on? And hey, I'm your teacher. We're just a small group. We love you. And I just noticed you're really quiet, or, you're really angry all the time. And like, hey, what's going on? Let me just pray for you. And let's talk. A little bit more harder to do in the Zoom world, but it could be adapted to it. But I've noticed when you visit, all the issues that you have in Sabbath school, right? And there are a lot of issues that can pop up. They get resolved. About 90% of them get resolved.
Yeah, wow.
One small visit.
Wow. I've heard, so for one of the youth that are doing a Sabbath school here, they're starting to start their Sabbath schools a little bit later. And what they're finding, that's working really well for them, because people get that little bit, I think they sleep in, but they're finding their discussion time runs way over time, which is a really good thing. So it's interesting, and people are actually talking up more in Zoom than they are than in face-to-face. So yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't really transplant the way that you face-to-face going onto Zoom. There are so many different dynamics, which I think some of them are predictable to an extent, but there's lots of many unpredictable ones. Yeah. So what about people, and I guess face-to-face versus Zoom? So I was chatting to one of the youth leaders here who's teaches Sabbath school, and he was saying that he struggles with everyone's mics are muted, everyone's cameras are off. He feels like he's talking to himself, and he's just really struggling to find, I guess, he just doesn't know where he's at, because he doesn't have that instant feedback that you do when you are with face-to-face. It's like, well, I can't see anyone. I feel like I'm talking to myself. How can a Sabbath school class like that function? Or should we engage, like if people don't feel comfortable putting their screens on, which some people don't, should you encourage them to, or do you just leave it, understanding that's something they don't want to do? Or just, any tips on how to navigate that space?
Yeah. And we're all navigating. This is new. This is uncharted waters for all of us. I totally get that as a teacher. And even when I preach on Zoom, everyone's cameras are off. I mean, it's kind of a psychological, this warfare that's going on.
Yeah.
So I actually say, hey, for my encouragement and to make it feel like there's fellowship here, turn on your cameras, man. Let's see each other. And I always call for, hey, are you listening? Are you hearing me? A thumbs up. And is there visual contact? Hey, let's open our Bibles to Ephesians chapter 6. There's no 7. So chapter 6. Are you there? If you're there, a thumbs up. Just to have that, even that minimal interaction. There's a certain pull and draws the person into the study rather than watching. And again, there's this layer of the screen that is an impediment to the human relationship, the interaction. I've noticed that asking questions and calling people out always is positive. So before I preach, I'll say, okay, we have Vic Youth Australia. I'm like, hey, Vic Youth, hey, and there's Kasia, hey, and she doesn't have confidence for her faith. That's okay. Just to lighten it up. And then also to acknowledge some people, they may be driving, some people may be in their bathroom, so we don't want to see them, and then just to give that layer of protection for them.
Sure.
But if you're not, and if you're just kind of doing nothing, hey, show your faces so that we can be a community together.
Yeah.
We've also thought about there's different Zoom games, and they're cheesy, but they're icebreakers, and icebreakers can be a bit cheesy, and they also help too. So hey, in your households, hey, first person to show a toothbrush wins. So ready, go. And so we all go and we come back. I got my toothbrush, and oh, you got to pick one. Just kind of make fun of that, and just it gives a little bit of more of a social flavor, and there's bonding that goes on rather than just watching and then turning it off.
Yeah, and especially if people, like here in Victoria, at least we don't have the ability to see anyone else. We can only go 5 kilometers from our houses and stuff. So everyone is really, we're very, very isolated right now and really feeling it. So I think some of those suggestions can really help make it a bit more lighthearted and communal and interactive. And
I love that word lighthearted. Like Sabbath school should be lighthearted. And I know there's Adventists that they want the meat and there are platforms for meat, but Sabbath school was meant to be a platform to invite your non-Adventist friends to. It was back in the day, there were more non-Adventists coming out to Sabbath school than there were Adventists. If you look at the history and the trajectory of where Sabbath school used to be. And it was more of an evangelistic format. So it was lighthearted. It was a place where you can ask Bible questions and get Bible answers and have a dialogue. But somehow that kind of transitioned and moved, and the evangelistic format moved for divine service, right? Divine service is where you bring your non-Adventist friends. And then Sabbath school is where you talk about all the Adventist questions. You can bring out spirit of prophecy, or you can talk about the national Sunday law, or, the Pope is, he sneezed the other day, whatever these things. And it shouldn't be. And so having lighthearted, but also biblical, it's a good balance to have.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that comment. What about people who overtake the conversation? So there's some people that are very isolated, and whenever there's people, they're just like, I want to talk and tell them everything about all aspects of my past week, and coming in on all the questions hard. And then you're there as a teacher, perhaps in the Zoom space, not knowing how to manage. Like everyone knows that he's talked too much, but how can you, frankly speaking, get him to stop talking, because other people need that space to.
And I know some leaders may feel that they don't want to hurt that individual's feelings, so they don't address that. But as the leader of a Bible study, you are there to protect everyone's interests and everyone's time as well. So in a sense, by protecting this one person, in a sense, you are violating everyone else. So there's a way that you need to protect the conversation, protect the fellowship, and you can do it very lightheartedly, depending on your relationship with that person. You can say, okay, well, Rose, thank you. We've heard from you, okay, and appreciate your enthusiasm. Anyone else? And you can say that, or you can make it even a little bit different. Like, all right, we've heard enough from the girls. Okay, any gentlemen that we heard of. Okay, we heard from the flowers. Okay, anyone without a flower name is your turn, and just kind of play it off a little bit.
Yes.
But if they continue to say, okay, Rose, we've heard from you, but and you can call on other people and say, hey, George, we haven't heard from you. Let's hear your beautiful tenor voice on today. Or, just kind of, I don't know. And maybe I'm a deep introvert, but I love I love hosting. I love the formality. And I think some people, they may not like the formality, but when it's a group interaction, they yearn for that structure and for formality.
Yeah, sure.
Not formality in the conversation, but at least in the general format. They need an introduction, and then kind of, parameters for engagement, and then a conclusion. But within it, there's freedom. And so as a host, I try to provide that structure. It's okay. You're kind of like, we're going to press the accelerator. Okay, no, break. You're going to break, and you're orchestrating the conversation.
Yeah. And I think what's coming through this conversation, there's a real art and craft to leading a Sabbath school well.
Absolutely.
It's not just like you just go do it because you've seen us do it and you can do it too. But I think there's so many even just pointers we can learn to just enhance it or make it that little bit better. I had another question.
And just if I can jump on, I can piggyback to be better. I know some may feel discouraged with that. They're like, well, I'm just not good at that, so I'm not going to do that at all, or I'm not born with that. I would say that I was very socially awkward. I still am socially awkward, but at a certain point, you get comfortable with your social awkwardness, and you use that. Your weaknesses actually become your strengths. I would say to many young adult leaders is to practice. We lean on gifts too much, or being naturally talented. But Sabbath school leading and Sabbath school teaching is an art. And the more you practice, and you're going to mess up for sure, but the more you practice, it gets easier and easier and easier. And you can also be mentored by maybe some older or those who may be more experienced teachers, and you kind of absorb some of their finesse and their tools here and there. So I see so many young adults that are like, well, I don't have that personality, or I'm not gifted in that. And so they don't try at all, but you need to make mistakes to learn. And I guess that's my point.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very true. Very true. What about class sizes? So I've been different churches run their Sabbath schools differently. And I've been part of Sabbath school groups where we have 4 people in the discussion time, and groups where we have 25 people, upwards of 30 people in the discussion time. How does that affect the, I guess, dynamics of your discussion? And is there an ideal number for a Sabbath school class to have that natural engagement?
Yeah, great question. I don't know about those stats within a Zoom world.
Yeah, it's different.
because the interaction is different, and people
Yep.
experience fatigue faster on Zoom just
They
because
do.
you're on all the time and you got to watch
Mm.
other people being on. So I don't know,
Mm.
but in a regular real world normal format, they and I've been to same similar Sabbath schools where there are 3 people and then there's like 100 people in Sabbath school.
Yeah.
Well, anything larger than 20 is really not a Sabbath school class. You're now it's a congregation. But the social scientists tell us that anywhere from 6 to 8 is a number that is comfortable for the human individual to interact, at least socially speaking.
Yes.
And anything less than 6 to 8, there's overwhelming pressure for the person to speak, right? So if you're in a class of like 3 people and the person the teacher asks a question, there's only 3 people. So even if you're the most deepest introvert, the pressure is just overwhelming. Like you have to contribute because everyone's eyes are on you. And then ironically, anything after 8 or 9, then what happens is naturally the introverts go into uber introvert mode. And people just kind of relax. We're like, well, I don't have to talk. Somebody's going to talk, and it's not going to be me, and I'm just going to cruise. But 6 to 8, and ironically, it's number 7. We're Seventh-day Adventists. Maybe there's something magical with the number 7. I don't know. But 7 is a nice, comfortable number where people feel like I can talk, I can withhold, and there's the pressure is just it's that sweet spot. And our Sabbath schools that are around 6 through 8 are the most comfortable, and they grow spiritually.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. 7, the magic number. Yeah. There must be something behind that. What about with certain leaders, the same persons, or just say the same persons leading every week, because no one does seem to want to step up. And I think that's been even more, it's more of the case even on Zoom now. People aren't wanting to step up because they find Zoom a little, like quite a bit more intimidating. But that leader is getting quite fatigued because they're doing it every single week and they're wanting other people to step up, but they can't seem to find them. Is there anything we can do to either encourage or motivate people to step up? Or maybe it's a function of them actually not knowing how to do one well on Zoom. So they just say, well, I don't want to do that. You can keep doing it.
It's just difficult. The Zoom world is helping us. It's really helping us to see, why are we doing what we're doing, right? And even the question, why do we even do Sabbath school, right? That I think is a fundamental question that we need to ask, that many Seventh-day Adventists don't ask. And it's just what we do. We before the sermon, we have a Sabbath school. And then so now in the Zoom world, we're like, well, let's do Sabbath school. Like, no one's asking the question why. Like, well, we've always done it, and so we need to do it. So we're just going to move this over to Zoom. And if you don't know the purpose of why we do it, and you're doing it, and you're the only one doing it, and fatigue can set in a lot faster. Because there's no end, and you don't see any end in sight, right? And you don't know why you're doing it, and you may be even very good at it, and people maybe even receive a blessing through your ministry. So I guess this is a long way of answering your question, but we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing Sabbath school? And Sabbath school is not to learn about the Bible study quarterly. It's not to even have a discussion. It's not even to be interactive before the main service, right? It's not a pre-service for the service. It's really the backbone structure for church growth in the Adventist church. I mean, that's where it came from. In the areas of the church where they're growing, the Sabbath school, and they used to call it branch Sabbath schools, and this goes way back. I don't know if you Aussies use that term anymore. But we've kind of sold all of our church growth to church growth specialists and that department. So then Sabbath school really has no mojo anymore, no whatever. So we're just let's just hang, and we're going to open the quarterly, and this is just an internal ministry, and that's good too. No one's blasting that, but without that directive and that initiative and that purpose. So you had a good Sabbath school, you had a teacher, and a teacher would train another teacher, and it would get bigger and bigger, invite your new non-Adventists, and they would get baptized through through the entire church ministry. And it gets so big that you break off and becomes, I mean, Sabbath school used
Yeah,
to be
wow.
small groups before small groups were
Yeah,
even common,
totally. Yeah,
you
sure.
know? And then these small groups become these branch Sabbath schools would become companies, and
Mm,
companies would become churches, and and
mm,
the church would just grow, right? It's just boom,
mm,
boom, 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 boom. So every leader in the back of their mind is thinking, how can
mm,
I grow this group so that
mm.
eventually we become a church plant? And
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
Vic Central, we have North Vic, South
yeah.
Vic, East Vic, Northwest Vic, and then I don't know anything about Victoria, but these just different.
Yeah,
Victoria's not a city, but anyway, these different branches going all around,
yeah.
and then even these branches who are really young, they're also giving forth. So anyway, it's a long,
Mm,
long answer, but if you have
yeah.
that mentality,
Why?
and it's like, man, I'm in this for
Mm,
the long run, right?
mm,
I know what my goal is, and then
mm.
I need to train another teacher because this class
Yeah,
is going to break off. So then naturally
yeah,
the teacher will want to invest in usually two or
totally.
three, like the lieutenants of the group who are kind of
Mm,
like, they're not leader level yet, but they're not
mm.
newbie level yet, but they're kind of like, they're the
Yeah,
good dependent ones. And
yeah,
usually
sure.
one of the 2 to 3 people will kind of shine. And then
Yep.
you're like, hey, there's 14 of us now, and so let's
Yeah.
branch off. So you're going to be the leader of that group, and be the leader of this group, and we'll still
Mm,
hang out. We'll still have frisbee, and we'll play golf and eat lunch
yeah,
together. But for Bible study, let's
sure.
branch off. So with
Mm,
that kind of timeline and framework,
mm, mm,
there's not as much fatigue, or
mm.
even if there's fatigue, you understand why, and there's a little bit
Yes.
more endurance through that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so wonderfully and eloquently expressed, Justin. Um, can I ask, where do you think along the line of it being quite missional did
Mm.
it almost stop being missional? It's quite like internal. Like, was there a certain
Yeah.
point, or was it just kind of like the trajectory of how it was played out? Or
It's a
yeah.
great question. I think it's one of the mysteries in the Adventist church.
Mm,
In my reading and research, it's not confined to the Adventist church. It's also
mm.
found the Sunday school. The Sunday people have their version too,
Yeah.
of the Presbyterians and the
Yes.
da da da. They
Mm,
It all happened around the same time, in at
mm,
least in North America and in Europe, and I think Australia is part of that first world momentum. But somewhere in the
mm.
70s and 80s is
Yeah,
when the
right.
shift happened. And they say
Interesting.
maybe cultural shift with
Yep.
the emphasis on centralization and authority. Maybe my personal take is this is the rise of the mega churches, right?
Mm,
So there used to
sure.
be this thing where like, oh, I'm of a church of like 15 people, and that wasn't
Mm,
a point of shame back in the day.
mm,
Like all the churches were about 30, 50,
mm.
But with these mega churches, oh, my church has 1,500 members, and after
Yeah.
that, your 15-member church was this dinky little dot, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
so what happened is there's a centralization of the worship service. The divine
Mm,
service was like the ultimate production. And then so it's just this momentum of get everyone into the divine service.
mm,
And Sabbath school and Sunday school
mm,
consequently was forgotten.
mm,
And then the amazing thing is, the big churches like Willow Creek and
mm,
Camelback, they've now confessed that, like, hey, the bigger, they call it the Walmartization of churches,
mm,
right? A Walmart comes in, they're
mm,
selling their products super cheap, and all the mom and pop shops, they shut down, and it
mm.
becomes this kind of concentration of all the customers. So what happens is a mega church comes in, and it just shuts down all the smaller churches, and it just becomes
Yeah,
one mega church and doesn't meet the
yeah,
needs of smaller groups.
yeah.
And this is where we're at.
Mm,
And especially in our urban areas, we need these
mm.
smaller groups and more the
Yeah,
one-on-one interaction and touch.
yeah,
And that's what I think Sabbath School can really fulfill and
yeah,
really meet that
sure.
need. Mhm.
Yeah, sure. Nah, understanding the why, and yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought of that before. So yeah, really, really interesting history lesson.
Yeah.
Um, So just before we wrap up, can I ask about, what are some resources out there that young adults can plug into to perhaps help them lead their Sabbath school class?
hmm So I joined the General Conference maybe about 4 years ago, and they asked me to
Mhm.
be the editor of the Young Adult Quarterly. I didn't really know we had a Young Adult Quarterly. I only knew about the adult one.
Yes.
And so we made
What
a
was the
lot of
young
updated
adult?
changes. It was called
Can
the
I ask?
Collegiate Quarterly.
Okay, yes, yes.
And it was for 18 to 35 years old. And
Hmm.
in some cultures, the word collegiate means high school. So
Yeah,
we got to change the name, got to
yeah,
change the format, maybe be a little bit more digitally friendly.
Mhm.
So in the last 4 years, we kind of revamped the entire project altogether. And so
Mhm.
you can go to inversebible.org,
Mhm.
INVERSE Bible.org. And we have created a new Bible study interaction format. So we really wanted people to get on the digital,
Mm.
but the digital can be quite oppressive these days. And there's a certain fatigue level with the digital. You know, you're on your
Mm.
thumbs all the time, you get notifications.
Yeah.
And there's this new renaissance of people really getting back into paper and pen, especially with Gen
Mm.
Z and the millennials
Mm.
and then alpha generation. You know, really getting to the writing Bible verses
They
out,
are. Yes.
into
Yes.
journaling, into, I
Mm.
mean, there's this new technology of handwriting. It's just so cool. I'm like, yeah, we've
Yeah.
had it for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But neurologically, and the science totally fundamentally backs this up,
Mm.
that you know, interaction with our thumbs and pointing and screen, touch screen,
Mm.
there's neurological defects that happen because of this. We don't
Oh,
learn the
wow.
material as deep as we can with
Writing.
writing. So when
Yeah.
it comes to scripture, we found a way with QR codes, with apps,
Mm.
and it's a whole system to use the digital
Mm.
for the benefit of the digital, and to use the
Mm.
analog for the benefit of the analog.
Yeah. Wow.
The benefit of the digital is there's unlimited space, right? You
Mm.
scroll and you can get as much material as you can. The editing
Mm.
is pretty minimal because we're just putting everything in there. We're not cutting everything out. We can get video
Yeah.
links and different whatever's. But in terms of space, there's this powerful impact with pen and paper. So the two interact. And
Mm.
the goal is everyone to get into the Bible verse. We call it inverse, just a different way of inverted way of thinking, a different way of thinking to approach
Yeah.
scripture. So that's the number one resource. And that so
Yes.
far, it's very popular in the
Yes.
United States, Canada, England, in the
Mm.
English speaking world. And we also get a lot of feedback from Australia as well.
Mm.
So appreciate all the support. We also have a TV show out there. You can go to hopetv.org/inverse. And we have representatives from the Caribbean world, from the African world, from the European world,
Yeah. Wow.
North America, and we're friends. We've been friends for about 10 years, and
Yeah.
we're just interacting. And hopefully we
Yeah.
can kind of
Nice.
model some of the fellowship, the interaction, joking around, but we
Yeah.
want to get fundamentally back to scripture. And
Yeah.
I think that's just fundamental to our identity as Adventists. We are all about the Bible, and the Bible points to
Mm.
Jesus. That's our connection
Amen.
there.
Mm.
Yeah.
So we'll put some of those the
Great.
resources that Justin mentioned on our page. And yeah, any last words of wisdom for leaders, or encouraging words through this time of Sabbath school in ISO, as we call it down here?
Yeah, no, I think this time of ISO is a gift from
Mm.
God. We do have more opportunity, more time, more alone time, and as painful as that may be in some circumstances, we need to utilize this time for the to benefit our relationships with the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I really encourage you all to if you're a leader or a not leader, to really get deep into scripture. Now's the best time to start to develop those habits, so that if we're ever released from this isolation and we're unleashed to this world, we will still have those habits that we set during this time, and say, hey, Lord, this is a bad time, but man, you make even bad things good. And it's a beautiful promise to have.
Oh, perfect. Oh, thank you, Justin, for your time. I think we've got James Paulette. Wait, James Paulette has just asked a question. How do we avoid Iso-Jesus?
So Iso-Jesus is this disease in the Adventist Church. For those of you who may not know Iso-Jesus, it is the practice of imposing your belief or your understanding into a text, and you're kind of jamming it in there. And it happens. Some people intentionally, some people unintentionally. So that's the beauty. One thing, that getting together with a group of like-minded believers. This is why fellowship is so important. The fellowship really checks off the social need. But as we all study the Bible together, and this is how kind of the Adventist Church got started, right? These were Baptists, these were Methodists, these were Catholics. They're studying the Bible, and they came together and like, hey, I saw this in the Bible, and I understand it this way. Do you understand it that way? And everyone's like, yeah, I do. Man, that's pretty profound. That's awesome. Then you're getting some traction here, right? But if you share this and you're like, dude, I've never seen that, and I don't see that in the text at all. You are on, you're on Mars, man. Then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. Then with humility, you go back to square one. The second thing is we really encourage people to follow the trajectory of the context. So rather reading that one verse, and that's where we're totally into writing the Bible verse out, not that one verse, but the entire chapter out. One verse before, one verse after, one chapter before, one chapter after, and what's the flow, right? What's the flow? About 80% of your Bible study should be on observing the flow and the context of that verse. Application, even though everyone wants to get to the application, that's like the remaining 10%, 5%. It's the easiest part. It's the funnest part.
Yeah.
But the hardest work is at finding that and preventing eisegesis from happening.
Yeah, sure. Oh, great tips there. So yeah, thank you, Justin, for your time. I know it's getting quite late there.
This is great now.
Really appreciate it. All the best with the tornado.
Thanks. That's 2020.
bless.
I mean, it started off with fires in your area and earthquakes, and there's an asteroid coming soon. Why not?
Yeah,
Why not?
it's just nuts. All right. I'll just try and end this live stream. So I'm not sure how this is gonna, if it would just cut off or if it takes it off live. So thank you. If I don't see you, thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. God bless. Bye. End meeting, I think. Leave meeting. Oh no. I think no, live on Facebook.